First, I acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. At this time, I invite the following officers to the podium with me. Amy Hansen, Search Manager with Colchester Ground Search and Rescue.
That's how Nova Scotian police kicked off a press conference announcing that they were scaling back the search for missing preschoolers Lily and Jack Sullivan. But don't let that news or the apparent incompetence on display here fool you. I think their major crime unit knows what they're doing. So in today's video, let's watch a recent interview with a Canadian ex-cop talking about this case so you can see why. I'm Deception Detective, an attorney trained in statement analysis. This channel exposes lies and manipulation. So if that's your thing, hit subscribe. For exclusives, early access, and other cool perks, consider becoming a channel member. Link in description. If you're not familiar with this case, don't worry because the interview itself will bring you up to speed. So there's just one thing I want to go over before we grab our deception decks and start analyzing, and it's this: everyone is innocent until proven guilty in the eyes of the law. But this isn't a courtroom, I'm not a judge, and we're not a jury. We have every right to form an opinion based on the evidence available to us, and our opinion doesn't have to be beyond a reasonable doubt, nor does it have to be based on evidence that would be admissible in court. And doing otherwise is outsourcing your critical thinking to someone else. Alright, without further ado, let's listen.
More now on the search for the missing Sullivan children, and we're joined by CTV public safety analyst Chris Lewis. Chris, during your tenure as Commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police, of course, you would have seen similar cases to this. What struck you about that RCMP update yesterday and what they had to say? Was there anything?
Yeah, absolutely there was, Todd. And I saw many searches throughout my career through all ranks across the broad expanse of Ontario. And many of them ended well and many of them didn't. This is a heartbreaker, absolutely. But what struck me the most, I think, is that I left it with a feeling that the RCMP know more than they're telling us. And I get that. You can't tell the public everything, and the detective staff sergeant, I believe, the major crime fellow, said it very well. I just can't tell you certain things right now. Well, if there's certain things you can't tell, then ultimately there's leads they're following up, in my view.
If you've been here for a while, you'll know that we've analyzed a bunch of missing persons cases on the channel. And one of the most important factors to whether the person gets found or the culprits get prosecuted is the competence of the local police department. And that's because they're the first ones to show up to the scene and start collecting evidence and statements from suspects and witnesses. So they can botch it like the John Benet Ramsey case or William Turrell case over in Australia. They can nail it like the Chris Watts case or Madeline Soto case. Or most frustratingly, they can let outside forces like another agency muddy the investigation like we saw in the Madeleine McCann case. Or in the case of Nicola Bulley in the UK, the media. Which is why I'm happy to hear Chris Lewis confirm, with his background as an ex-police commissioner, something that we've speculated about in the comments of my other videos in this series, that the local police's decision not to issue an Amber Alert for the missing children in the first place, and now to start scaling down the ground search, is a sign that they have a strong theory that they're working on, and that the Major Crimes Unit has enough discipline not to share it with all of us. All right, let's keep listening.
We heard they don't think the siblings could be alive. Was that something of a surprising admission?
It was an absolute shock to me, to be honest, because I'm thinking after 5-6 days, there's a good chance they're still alive. The weather hasn't been that bad. I've seen searches where people have been 2 weeks in the bush under horrendous conditions. One man was legally blind and still alive. So you just never give up. So to make that statement also makes me think that they're suspecting something more than a couple of children lost in the bush.
Okay. The RCMP said there are spots they want to revisit. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me they're obviously, as they said, there's places they want to research. So, but where are those places? Are they within the area they searched? So are they going back to some specific dense areas to have an even closer look? Because, quite frankly, in dense bush, you could walk by a child and not see them. And that's the sad reality of it all. So is that the plan, or are there other locations that they want to search?
When I made my first video analyzing this case 2 days ago, I titled it, "I Hope I'm Wrong," because I really do hope my theory about this case is wrong. However, once again, we have Chris corroborating something that I said in those videos, that the children, unfortunately, are probably deceased. And that's not just because the police seem to have some reason to suspect that's the case by winding down the search, but also because the mother Malaya and father Daniel are acting that way too. I won't go over all the indicators of that, but a quick one is that Daniel referred to Lily in the past tense when he was being interviewed about her only 4 days into their disappearance. And even more concerningly, as I pointed out in my most recent video in this case, So Many Red Flags, the mother, Malaya, has left the area. She's literally left the county, which is something that most biological mothers of children who might still be out there in the woods somewhere, cold and afraid, simply don't do. Moreover, as Chris said there, if they are going back to research areas around the house, it could be because they think they may have missed the bodies because they're so small. These kids were just 6 and 4 years old. All right, let's keep watching.
We heard that major crimes is involved. Should that tell us anything, or is that sort of de rigueur?
I think it's standard that investigators be involved in parallel with any search, particularly of children, not a lost hunter, but two children that shouldn't be in the bush. There'd be a search or investigation to say, was there some neglectful thing? I'm not suggesting there was. How did two little children get into the bush? Or was it something else? Was there a crime involved? Were they taken by somebody known or unknown? etc. And there's all kinds of terrible possibilities that come to mind here. But obviously, major crime is there. They've had the big gun there, not a constable, detective, and a detachment. And so they're onto something here.
On that point, the stepfather has told us he suspects they might have been abducted. Does that trigger anything at the police level? How do they react to a statement like that?
Well, I mean, yeah, they'd be on it like, absolutely, because why do you think that? Who do you think did it? Who had a reason to do it?
If you've seen my videos about William Turrell, a little boy who went missing in Australia back in 2014, you'll know how happy I was to hear Chris say that, because that is the way police forces should interpret when a suspect or the parent of a missing child pushes a theory. Unless there's evidence to suggest a kidnapping, the notion that the parent of a missing child only suspects a stranger kidnapping, one of the statistically least likely scenarios, is a giant red flag for a hoax. It's such a red flag I've included it on the Spotting Hoaxes card in my deception deck, my 52 favorite rules for spotting lies and manipulation. Conclusiveness about something that's not in evidence suggests that they have secret knowledge that they're not revealing to us. Whether that knowledge is that they fabricated the story entirely, which is why they know everything, or even more disturbingly, that they know for a fact the kid was kidnapped because they know who the kidnapper is.
Why do you think that? Who do you think did it? Who had a reason to do it? What makes you say that? Because at that point, as a father or stepfather or mother, you'd be thinking, oh my God, we have to find them. Where are they? Not suddenly out of the blue, oh, I think somebody abducted them. I mean, that's kind of a bizarre statement. But people are people, and they do and say different things when they're under stress. So, it's certainly a red flag, but ultimately, what does that mean in the big scheme of things? Who knows at this point?
Yeah. We heard police say they don't think the children could have gone too far, certainly not beyond that search area.
And my thoughts there, Todd, are that these are trained searchers in physical shape and proper equipment and clothing on, and they struggled to get to a certain point over a number of days. So in their minds, at the very least, they're thinking those kids could not have got further than point X. So we're going to go back and research. But then again, of course, there's the investigative piece, and we don't know where all that's going. But there's more to come in the next few days, I believe.
I agree. There's much more to come because this case is brand new. So make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you know when I post my next video about this case. Check the end card for my previous videos. Until next time, stay true.